Giving the public what it wants. Wireless Age, May 1923. What does the public want? Does it want jazz, or does it prefer classical and operatic music? What value does it get out of markets and weather reports? Does it really like to listen to lectures and speeches? Does it discriminate against mechanically reproduced music? Or does it prefer the reproduction of the talent of a first-grade artist to the performance of a second or third-grade local celebrity? If there are any persons in this country who are capable of answering these questions and answering them accurately, they are the program directors of the various broadcasting stations. They are intimately in touch with the state of public opinion concerning their programs. Radio fans have in the course of 2 short years earned a wonderful reputation as letter writers. If a feature pleases them exceedingly, they have a habit of writing to the station and telling it so, and they do as much if it displeases them. The radio audience reacts in the mail. This is really an extraordinary advantage for broadcasting. A man who is running a theater or moving picture house knows very quickly by the box office receipts whether what he is producing meets with public approval, but he very seldom is able to learn exactly why something is liked or disliked. The people either buy tickets or do not, and the rest is just rumor. The broadcasters, however, get it all down in black and white. They know. The Wireless Age has undertaken to perform a valuable service for both the broadcasting stations and the radio audience by preparing a symposium of the public's reactions to the broadcasting programs. The data was secured through questionnaires sent to every broadcasting station, asking for details of their programs and information as to the reaction from the radio audience. The facts given in this article are drawn from those questionnaires. The basic facts revealed in this matter may be summarized very quickly. Some of them were, to say the least, unexpected, and they will surprise many people. First, despite the current popular opinion that the great majority of the American people prefer jazz to all other music, American broadcasting stations devote only 25% of their time to that type of entertainment. Classical and operatic music takes more of the average broadcasting station's time than any one item. Jazz is in second place. Market and weather reports are in third place, occupying 23% of the time. And speeches and lectures are fourth, taking 18% of the time. The average length of transmission time per week is 8.8 hours, which will surprise those who live in the big cities and are accustomed to having at least 2 powerful stations occupying the air for 4 or 5 hours daily. The taste of the American public is decidedly in favor of personal performances in the studio, for 72% of the programs are thus transmitted, and only 28% consists of reproducing the music of a phonograph or player piano. The composition of the radio audiences has puzzled a great many. Nobody knows just how numerous they are or where they live. But 44% of the broadcasting stations estimate that the farm audience outnumbers the city. 39% of the stations say that the city listeners are more numerous. And 17% make it a 50-50 straddle. The questionnaires from which these figures are drawn, of course, came from every part of the country, and include broadcasters of all types, from the tiny 5-watt transmitter to the powerful 1,000-watt station with a transcontinental and transoceanic range. Some of the questionnaires were accompanied by letters of great interest, many of them revealing that the lot of the program director is not as happy or as easy as it may seem to those who merely listen. He has some real problems, and in the strenuous business of solving them has come to hold very firm opinions. For instance, station KGB at Tacoma, Washington, comments in a striking manner upon the difficulty of pleasing everybody. The question, what the public wants, is one we have been endeavoring to answer ever since we began broadcasting. We are ever and anon searching for what the people want, and it's a hard job, believe me. I have often before, and I think it is fitting here, compared a broadcasting station with a newspaper. The same necessity for pleasing everyone is present in both cases. Just as a newspaper must endeavor to please both the minority and the majority, so a broadcasting station must cater to the likes and dislikes of every class of people. For instance, there is a class of people who absolutely abhor jazz and go in strongly for music of a more classical nature. On the other hand, there is a class just diametrically opposed to the first sort. They are strong for syncopation, and too much of the music they term highbrow elicits only some very choice expletives of abuse. Consequently, it is necessary to so arrange the program so that there is a preponderance of neither and a sprinkling of both. Manifestly, there will always be someone who will be displeased. You can't please 'em all, is the cry every program director in the nation is wailing to high heaven. Perhaps someday some hitherto an undiscovered genius will discover some way of pleasing everybody. Until then, however, in the words of a well-known cartoonist, try and do it. When I mention novelties as the feature of greatest popularity, I mean anything new or novel pleases the radio fans. I am always on the lookout for something new and unusual. Since these are nearly always music, it means that music comes under the category of a feature of first importance on our programs. We are pulling stunts of all sorts. They are the sort that make the fans talk about them afterward, and KGB is getting a better and more widespread reputation every day. Let me illustrate what I mean by a novelty. Late in July, KGB broadcasted a complete marriage ceremony from the bridal march and the soloist to the marriage vows and the nuptial kiss. We presented a trip around the world with records. That was a hit. The other night, we gave a record minstrel show with a lot of novel effects, and every mail brings us more letters of congratulation on the affair. Shortly, we are to present a debate via radio, and a bunch of new and novel features. The same old thing grows tiresome, and if a broadcasting station desires to keep its auditors, it must keep them interested. I shall be interested to learn the opinions of the other broadcasting station operators of the country. My observations have been earned by dint of cruel experience. It's a mean thing to say, but there is no audience in the world so unappreciative as a radio audience, it seems to me. They are more prone to complain than to praise, and criticize more often than they endeavor to help. But still, I don't suppose it really is because they are unappreciative that we seldom hear from most of them, but that they are merely undemonstrative. I wish they could come to know that a broadcasting station gets no other return for its work, in 99 cases out of 100, but the scant praise and kind words of appreciation it gets from some of its auditors. Hardly less determined is the attitude of KFED of Billings Polytechnic Institute, Billings, Montana, which got a license, listened in, and from the simple experience of using its ears, decided not to say anything at all. First of all, let me say that our own broadcasting station, KFED, is no more. By the time this reaches you, the license will have been returned to the radio inspector and canceled at our request. We never broadcasted a single program, mainly because the public does not want the kind of programs we could offer. If some 500 other owners of broadcasting stations would follow this example and return their licenses, leaving a few of the very best stations to do the broadcasting, then the public would be pleased. Broadcasting by small local stations is detested by all except the few small boys who are experimenting with crystal sets. Of all the many things put out onto the ether today, the following are mentioned among those least desired. Advertising, direct or otherwise. Long drawn-out announcements. Not more than 5% of the total program should be thus consumed. Acknowledging cards, addressing individuals, sermons, and other religious services. The churches will be far better off if they will confine their services within the walls of the church itself, rather than send them out into the air mixed with the racket of the jazz band. I shall not try to enumerate the many good things which can be sent out from a broadcasting station, but I will try to answer your question in regard to the most important economic service. In my opinion, the greatest service rendered in broadcasting lies in the good wrought by virtue of the pleasure and entertainment afforded isolated peoples, such as farmers and ranchers in sparsely populated districts, etc. Radio brings these people into touch with the outside world, and so is a godsend to them. The broadcasting stations which send out programs after 10:30 p.m. are doing a great deal of harm by encouraging people to stay up until the wee small hours to listen to their jazz music. KFED was to have been operated by an educational institution, and it is essential to note that many colleges and schools in all parts of the country are operating broadcasting stations on an educational rather than an entertainment basis. As WCAS, the William Hood Dunwoody Industrial Institute, Minneapolis, Minnesota, says, "The educational side of our service seems to be the most important phase of it. We are looking forward to this with growing interest, and feel quite sure that it will be one of the most important services rendered by radio transmitting stations. We believe that the people will tire of the common music. In fact, it is hard to get something new, whereas the educational features contain useful information, and this is what many people desire." WBAA, Purdue University, Lafayette, Indiana, gives most of its time to lectures, engineering, and agriculture, and makes it plain that it has made no attempt to develop entertainment side of broadcasting, but find that there are many listeners who are interested in educational features. Station WHA, University of Wisconsin, Madison, Wisconsin, has a bolder spirit, because it violates what many people consider to be the essential rule of success in any endeavor, namely, give the people what they want. Says WHA, "We are guided not so much by what the public wants as by what the public needs in our broadcasts." The University of Wisconsin believes there is a large field for serving the citizens of Wisconsin and adjacent states by disseminating educational and informational talks by means of the radio telephone. That station transmits no music. Diametrically opposite is the attitude of WOAN, the Vaughn Conservatory of Music, Lawrenceburg, Tennessee, which confines itself almost entirely to music, with only about half an hour a week of jazz. WOAN notes as its most important service the inculcation of a spirit of cooperation in the communities covered by the concerts. Market and weather reports are to be broadcast as soon as the station can make arrangements to secure them. Still another angle of the educational service of the radio telephone is seen by WCAL, St. Olaf College, Northfield, Minnesota, which prefers to educate by transmitting the classics, rather than placing emphasis on lectures by teachers or other authorities. The most popular program that this station has transmitted was the broadcasting of Shakespeare's As You Like It by a student cast which had previously transmitted the play in the college auditorium. Our reports of athletic contests and scores are eagerly awaited, it seems. Reports indicate that listeners appreciate classical music. Religious services from this station are greatly enjoyed. In response to insistent demands, the Shakespearean play is to be repeated. Other institutions of learning consider that the broadcasting of college games appeals most to the radio audience. KFDJ, the Oregon Agricultural College, Cornwallis, Oregon, ranks college sports as first in popularity, college musical clubs as second, and lectures third. Station WSAJ, Grove City College, Grove City, Pennsylvania, last winter broadcast its championship basketball games play-by-play. And as the team of this college led the league in percentage of games won, its broadcast reports were filled with intense interest for Pennsylvanians. WCAZ, Carthage College, Carthage, Illinois, did exactly the same thing and says, "The basketball games, play-by-play from the gym, with rooting, band, and noise, have brought hundreds of answers from all parts of the country." The University of Colorado, KFAJ, at Boulder, Colorado, places its athletic reports first in popularity, and is almost alone among the stations in mentioning late releases of Edison and Brunswick records as having attracted public commendation. On a different basis is WCN, operated by Clark University, Worcester, Massachusetts, which, while 5 out of its 12 hours a week are given over to jazz, outlines its policy as follows. It has been the intention to develop the Clark station in so far as possible along lines of permanent value. For this reason, we have been particularly interested in such government reports as crop, market, commerce, and weather reports, as far as circumstances would permit, in putting on the air worthwhile things in literature and music, as well as lectures of some educational value. Still another policy, and a new one in broadcasting, is explained by WHAZ, the famous station operated by the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute at Troy, New York, which has been heard in every state in the Union, in the Pacific Ocean, and even in New Zealand. We are trying to give all the social units in this district an opportunity for self-expression, artistically and emotionally through music, intellectually and morally through the medium of lectures, explains WHAZ. There are a number of broadcasting stations operated by newspapers, and on the surface, it would appear that the one person most fitted in all the world to ascertain the wants of the public would be he who publishes a newspaper and operates a broadcasting station. But the newspapers themselves are highly individual in type, and so are the broadcasting stations owned by various dailies all over the country. WGF, the Register and Tribune, Des Moines, Iowa, devotes half of its time to jazz and 40% to classical music. These percentages may reverse themselves, for the program manager says, "We broadcast considerable high-grade music, and the demand for it is increasing. 90% of the programs are personally produced." WGF explains, "We work only Tuesday and Friday evenings, and a church service on Sunday. We operate thus on the theory that it would be impossible to present first-class programs every night, and because persons in the locality of a broadcasting station grow very weary of daily and nightly broadcasting by the same station, which cannot be tuned out to get distant stations. Many stations, we believe, are making a great mistake in an effort to get their money's worth out of their investment in a transmitter. Station WMAQ, operated by the Chicago Daily News and the Fair, located in the Fair Store, Chicago, gives 3/4 of its time to classical music, and says, "We have found from our vast correspondence that the general tendency of the public is a demand for the higher class in music and along educational lines. We give one popular program a week on Saturday night, when we generally have a dance orchestra." The Morning Oregonian, operating KGW in Portland, Oregon, is another newspaper that finds that classical music is apparently more popular, but it carefully points to a flaw in its method of drawing its conclusion. The response from concerts of classical music is greater than that from concerts of dance music, but this is because the people who appreciate it are such that will take the trouble to write or telephone. WIAR, the Paducah Evening Sun, Paducah, Kentucky, is not at all critical of the writing ability of any parts of its audience, and reports its surprise at the number of persons who write in about the programs preferring old-time sentimental music to jazz and operatic numbers. The majority of our letters come from persons in the small towns and the country proper. None of these newspapers place any particular emphasis on market reports or news, which some people might consider entirely natural. There are at least 2 stations, however, that make a dissemination of news, and particularly market reports, their main reason for being. Station WMAJ, operated by the Daily Drover's Telegram, Kansas City, Missouri, gives its entire time to market reports. It is on the air for 10 minutes of each hour, from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m., giving the latest quotations as received from the markets in Chicago, St. Louis, and Kansas City. That these reports are appreciated are shown by the letters stockmen and farmers send, thanking us for the service, says WMAJ. Another station that devotes most of its attention to markets is WJAG, the Norfolk Daily News, Norfolk, Nebraska. It only gives 1% of its time to music, equally divided between opera and jazz, and the rest of its attention is devoted to current events and market reports. WJAG says of its listeners that they do not listen to educational programs. We receive hundreds of cards telling us that our service is preferred on account of the markets and current events. We are an agricultural community and do not try to compete with the larger stations at night. All our broadcasting is done in the daytime. We are out to serve the farmers and do seem to be giving them what they want. Our station seems to be more of a commercial plant than one of entertaining. The rest of the broadcasting stations do not fall easily into set classifications. About every kind of firm and type of individual has a broadcasting station of one kind or another. That it is quite possible to go from one extreme to another in trying to please the public is indicated by KGO, Altadena Radio Laboratory, Altadena, California, which it describes as follows. When we started broadcasting last July, the local broadcasting was too jazzy and of poor quality, so we put on old-time songs and classical music with Edison Records, giving better results than the personal artists. Now, the complaint is that the Class B stations are too highbrow and have turned to us for lighter music. The old jazzy stations have practically all quit. In our opinion, people do not want education, lectures, etc. by radio, and when the other stations are giving lectures, they tune us in for dance. This station now divides its time equally between dance music and classical music, and uses its phonograph practically exclusively. Station WLH of Indianapolis, Indiana, is just going through the process of cutting down the percentage of jazz. It reports, "Our listeners are very tired of jazz and mediocre music or programs. We are trying to furnish only the best. Our patrons say they will raise a fund for high-class talent. This is our next move." A station that feels that it has gone through the situation from the start to a satisfactory finish is WRK of Hamilton, Ohio, which now transmits no jazz and divides its time equally between classical music and lectures. The lectures include talks prepared by the Department of Health, but the audience does not like them very well. The only kind of lectures that seem to take are those on radio for city dwellers, Department of Agriculture for rural and farm people. All like the musical programs. Just one station confesses, whether boldly or reluctantly it cannot be said, that it is operated for business purposes. WEAP, Mobile, Alabama, says the station so far has been used principally as a feeder for trade at our store to stimulate sale of sets and parts. One of the surprising facts developed by this questionnaire is the number of transmitters of exceedingly small power, some of them having only 5 watts, others 10, 15, 20, and 50. Because the large stations of 500 watts power have the greatest audience, probably most people think that most stations are that type, but this is far from being the case. Even when to the 500 watt stations are added the 1000 watt plants such as KDKA, WJZ, and WIP, the number of low power stations is sufficient to draw the average down to 200 watts. Also, it has been concluded that the radio audience prefers to listen to personal performances, either in the studio or by remote control, and that the phonograph and the player piano are falling behind in popularity. These conclusions have been drawn not direct from the radio audience, but indirectly from a study of reported programs, on the theory that the broadcasting stations are giving the public what it wants.